think we are much the worse because of that. Anyway, I don't mean to suggest that Aldo Leopold had all the answers, but I do think he framed the questions right. I think that our environmental challenge today is very much a challenge of culture. It is not a challenge of science. It is not a challenge of technology. Frankly, a large number of our environmental problems today, we already have the science we need to deal with them. We already have the technology we need. That's not the missing piece. The missing piece is that we can't get together and do these things. You could say, oh, well, isn't it too expensive? I am still waiting for the person to come forward and explain to me why taking care of the environment has net environmental costs overall. I have seen cost-benefit studies done on every federal environmental statute. They all generate economic benefits that greatly exceed the costs, usually by very wide margins. This notion that it's expensive, I believe, is largely proposed by critics, and the environmental movement has never stepped up to challenge it. It is certainly true that environmental protection can be economically disruptive. There's no doubt that businesses lose money. There is no doubt that people lose jobs. And if that's all you focus on, then it seems to be costly. But that's not an all things considered assessment. If you're concerned about programs that are economically disruptive, the first thing you would get rid of is free trade, which is horribly disruptive. But of course, the argument is, oh, well, businesses go under, people lose jobs, but there's an overall net gain for it. Well, if we had the same attitude toward environmental protection, we might see that as vastly more beneficial as well. Ditto with these other things. I mean, is it inconsistent with capitalism? Absolutely not. Believe me, the market can deal with all sorts of limitations on scope. I mean, you know, when we came along and decided no more slavery and no more child labor and things like that, there's no problem. I mean, as long as the market knows the rules, it can operate within them. And that would be true with environmental protection as well. I mean, it's true that there's, again, disruption, that people are, you know, surprised by changes, but the market can work perfectly well. Ditto with private property. Good heavenly days, there's lots of ways that we can define private rights in nature. Private property rights, we have done so, different cultures do so. I mean, our notion of private property, goodness, I wish people would look at the way private land rights are defined around the world today. Our vision of private property differs radically from that in other countries, which are, by the way, every bit as economically prosperous. I mean, we take it for granted that landowners ought to have some right to develop what they own. That is by no means clear around the world. In lots of countries that isn't true. We assume that you as a landowner have the right to exclude anybody and everybody from your land, even if they're causing no harm. I wish we would go back, even in our country, to the early 19th century when that was not the prevailing understanding whatsoever. We had a vastly different understanding. The countryside was open for common use. In fact, when people in early America said, this is a free country, not like back in England, among the things they would mean is, in this country, you can just go out and hunt, where in England, you have to own land in order to hunt. A lost chapter here in American history about the redefinition of property rights to give landowners the right to exclude people from those lands that they had not fenced or tilled. I mean, you always had the right to exclude people from lands or fenced and tilled. Anyway, I guess I've said about all I need to say, but you know, I really think that these lists that are put out, what can you do to save the earth, are well-meaning, but frankly, they miss the main things. If I were putting a list, I would say, number one, as a citizen, vote for candidates who will promote good collective policies. Number two, please understand that in order for collective action to take place, you need organized groups of citizens getting together and pushing for it. And that means go out and join and support some conservation group that is headed in the right direction, particularly ones that are pushing for collective action, not just ones that are trying to get people to better their lives individually. If we would go back and look at our environmental progress so far, again, this is something where our history is very lacking, we would have to give huge credit to the role of environmental groups in bringing about environmental improvement. Our air is cleaner because of what environmental groups have done. Our water is much cleaner. Our wildlife habitat is better. Without environmental groups, we never, ever would have had the Conservation Reserve Program. I mean, we need to be giving credit here to environmental groups. I mean, at the moment, they're demonized, of course, as being somehow evil people. You know, we've got to get over that. Thanks. Sorry to ramble on so much. You can tell I get sort of agitated on these.